the strategic decision for the 21st century. The nation will be facing a strategic decision in the November 2024 election. The election will decide whether to remain a populist constitutional republic or move to a Chinese feudal system form of government. There is a segment of the political establishment or elite in this country that is trying to move the country from a constitutional republic to a modern version of a feudal form of government. Feudalism, historically, was a social and economic system that dominated medieval Europe, characterized by relationships between lords, vassals, and serfs, where land ownership and obligations defined one's place in society. In the modern political version, the term feudalism is used to describe certain power dynamics where a small elite holds disproportionate control over resources and influence. Transitioning from a constitutional republic to a feudal system of government involves significant shifts in fundamental principles, institutions, and power structures. Moving towards feudalism would entail reinforcing social stratification, tribalism, with limited social mobility and privileges reserved for the elite ruling class. Barack Obama, his presidency, which began in 2009, encapsulated his promise to bring about significant shifts in various aspects of American society and governance. The Affordable Care Act, ACA, also known as Obamacare, expanded government control of the nation's healthcare system. Obama prioritized addressing climate change, signing the Paris Agreement in 2015, which committed the United States to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. He promoted a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants already living in the United States, as well as a renewed focus on issues of social justice and civil rights. His presidency undeniably represented a period of transformation, with increased governmental control over all aspects of American life. Hillary Clinton was positioned to carry forward Obama's policy agenda and the transformation of America had she won the presidency in 2016. Her policy proposals aligned with Obama's priorities and was bolstered by her association with Obama, as she frequently praised his accomplishments and sought to build upon them. Donald Trump's unexpected victory in the 2016 U.S. presidential election disrupted the plans and aspirations of the political establishment or elite who were driving certain agendas for change in America. His campaign, marked by populist rhetoric and promises to drain the swamp in Washington, resonated with a significant portion of American voters who felt disenfranchised and disillusioned by traditional politics and the move to change America. Throughout his presidency, Donald Trump faced significant opposition from the entrenched political, economic, and cultural interests that have traditionally held power and influence within the political establishment. Trump's administration was subject to numerous investigations, including probes into Russian interference that in the end proved to be fabricated and false. Fatigue or frustration over the political landscape, particularly regarding Donald Trump, elected Joe Biden to the United States presidency in 2020. With Biden's election, there were hopes for change back to normal and bringing the country back together. But Biden returned to the failed Change America policies of Barack Obama that elected Donald Trump. The three pillars of the constitutional republic. Constitutional republics are characterized by representative government, rule of law, and separation of powers. The three pillars are the Constitution, the middle class, and law and order. Transitioning to feudalism would require the erosion or dismantling of these democratic institutions, with power becoming more centralized and authoritarian. The Constitution is a cornerstone of American democracy and provides the framework for governance, while the middle class is often considered the backbone of a democratic society. It represents a significant portion of the population that enjoys economic stability, opportunities for advancement, and a reasonable standard of living. A strong middle class is vital for social stability, economic growth, and political engagement. Safety is essential for maintaining social order, fostering economic prosperity, and upholding the well-being of citizens. In a constitutional republic like the United States, Governance by law means that leaders and citizens alike are subject to the rule of law. This principle ensures that decisions and actions of government officials are constrained by legal frameworks, institutions, and norms. It promotes accountability, fairness, and the protection of individual rights. Attempts to moving from a constitutional republic to a feudal system of government have resulted in a significant upheaval and resistance from those accustomed to democratic principles and freedoms. Such a transition has faced substantial opposition, leading to social unrest, political instability, and a loss of individual rights and liberties. The feudal system society was organized hierarchically, with the king or monarch at the top, followed by nobles, knights, and peasants. Each level of the hierarchy owed certain obligations and duties to those above it. The feudal system was based on a network of reciprocal relationships of loyalty and obligation. Lords granted land to vassals, who pledged loyalty, military service, and other forms of support in return. The manor was the economic unit of feudal society. It consisted of the lord's estate, peasant villages, agricultural land, and various economic activities. Peasants worked the land in exchange for protection and the right to live on the lord's estate. In the 21st century, the king is replaced by the president, the nobles and knights by the corporate leaders, and the peasants by the people. The first step to the feudal system. The move to a dependent class did not start with Obama, but with President Lyndon B. Johnson and the Great Society. The Great Society refers to a set of domestic programs and initiatives launched by President Lyndon B. Johnson in the United States during the 1960s. Johnson introduced the Great Society agenda during his State of the Union address in 1964, outlining his vision for addressing poverty, inequality, and social injustice in America. Johnson declared an unconditional war on poverty and introduced programs such as Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, and various other initiatives aimed at reducing poverty and expanding access to health care and social services for low-income Americans. What it did was the start of the dependent class. Developing a dependent class. Since 1970 and the Great Society, out-of-wedlock birth rates have soared. In 1965, 24% of black infants and 3.1% of white infants were born to single mothers. By 1990, the rates had risen to 64% for black infants, 18% for whites. By 2018 for blacks, the number is 69.4%. For American Indians, Alaska Natives, 68.2%. Native Hawaiians, other Pacific Islanders were at 50.4%. For Hispanics, 51.8%. For whites, 28.2%. And for Asian Americans, a paltry 11.7%. In an interview by a social worker of underage girls of an unwed mother, they could not wait until they became of age so that they could become pregnant and get their own welfare checks. Thus, the start of the modern-day peasant class, dependent on the king, the president. The destruction of the middle class. The middle class and family unit serves as a cornerstone of a constitutional republic by promoting political stability, driving economic prosperity, fostering social cohesion, upholding democratic values, and encouraging civic engagement. Transitioning this class into a dependent one requires significant changes in economic policies, social structures, and governance systems involving policies that erode economic opportunities, social mobility, and individual freedoms. Such policies lead to economic stagnation, increased inequality, and social unrest. Instituting such a transition would face significant political challenges, including opposition from the middle class itself, as well as from civil society groups and political parties. The umbrella for these changes is climate change and increases in crime. California already is dictating the elimination of fossil fuels and how you water your lawn, while New York wants to control how you make your pizza. Lack of law enforcement will convince people to give up their rights in trade for safety. Unrestricted abortions. As of January 2022, the birth rate in the United States has been declining for several years, while the death rate has been relatively stable or slightly increasing. This has led to concerns about the long-term demographic trends and the potential impact on various aspects of society, including the labor force and economic growth. This has been used to justify open borders and large-scale illegal immigration, who are dependent on government for their survival. Unrestricted abortions impact the growth of the middle class by reducing the population growth rate. Unrestricted abortions affect the demographics of the middle class. If certain segments of the population are more likely to undergo abortions, it would influence the composition and size of the middle class. Controlling the presidency. The Electoral College determines the President of the United States every 4 years. Each state is allocated a certain number of electoral votes based on its representation in Congress. This number is equal to the total number of senators, and representatives that the state has in the U.S. Congress. For example, California, the most populous state, has 55 electoral votes because it has 2 senators and 53 representatives. The number of representatives is based on the state's population, which is reapportioned every 10 years after the U.S. Census. The U.S. Census Bureau collects data from all citizens and foreign-born who participate in its censuses and surveys, regardless of legal status. Thus, illegal aliens are implicitly included in the Census Bureau estimates of the total population. The problem is that as the states like California and New York are squeezing the middle class, a significant number leave the state for less restrictive states. This will eventually result in loss of electoral votes. Between 2021 and 2022, roughly 818,000 California residents moved out of state, according to recent data from the U.S. Census Bureau. Since 2020, New York has lost 884,000 residents to other states. Right now, California has 54 electoral votes, and New York has 29. It takes 270 votes to elect the president, so California and New York represent 31%. It is not surprising that both California and New York are sanctuary states. Thus, over time, illegal aliens will replace the middle class. 2024 elections. The 2024 U.S. elections will represent a choice between competing ideological visions and policy priorities. Candidates and parties are advocating for different approaches to governance, including the role of government in regulating the economy, protecting individual rights, addressing social inequalities, and engaging with the international community. The 2024 U.S. elections are important because they represent a choice between the democratic principles of a populist constitutional government and the characteristics of China's feudal form of government. The election outcome will have implications for domestic governance, foreign policy, and the global balance of power.